I knew the exact moment I was going to be screwed over. It wasn't when the security guard refused to look me in the eye, and it wasn't when my badge stopped working. It was the moment Jordan Carr, our vice president of product, a man whose entire technical knowledge could be written on a grain of rice with a crayon, smiled at me. You know that smile. It's the shark-like grin of a man who just realized he's about to eat a very expensive meal for free. We were in the fishbowl, the glass-walled conference room on the 14th floor that overlooks the dreary gray skyline of Massachusetts. It was the final internal demo for the Project Etha modular battery system. I've spent the last 3 years of my life bleeding lithium and sweating electrolytes for this thing. It wasn't just a battery, it was a symphony of chemical engineering. A modular power cell that didn't just store energy. It managed thermal runaway with a passive cooling architecture I dreamt up during a fever dream in 2021. It was beautiful. It was worth millions. And it was sitting there on the mahogany table, humming softly like a purring cat. I looked around the room. The CEO, Marcus, was there, looking at the prototype like it was a pile of gold bullion. The investors were leaning forward, their eyes glittering with the reflection of potential stock buybacks. And then there was Jordan. Jordan, who wears suits that cost more than my first car and smells like Santal 33 and unearned confidence. So Jordan announced, standing up and smoothing his tie. As you can see, the thermal efficiency is up 40% from last quarter. We're ready for the license rollout. I took a sip of my lukewarm water. We didn't do anything, Jordan. I did. I spent nights sleeping under my desk. I ran the simulations that kept crashing the server farm. You were busy playing golf and posting LinkedIn thought pieces about synergy. Speaking of synergy, if you're enjoying this descent into corporate madness and want to see a woman absolutely dismantle a tech bro's ego, go ahead and hit subscribe and maybe drop a like. It fuels my rage fire better than caffeine, and trust me, we're going to need a lot of fuel for where this story is going. Back to the room. The air was thick with the smell of dry erase markers and greed. Marcus turned to me. Sienna, it's remarkable. The density metrics are off the charts. Thank you, Marcus, I said, keeping my face neutral. The key was the anode structure. It allows for rapid ion transport without the heat buildup. Right, Jordan interrupted, stepping in front of me to block Marcus's line of sight. The architecture is key. Exactly what I've been pushing the team toward. I'd pushed the team toward using cheaper materials that would have turned the battery into a hand grenade, but I didn't say that. I just watched him work the room. I watched him claim credit for the late nights, the breakthroughs, the agonizing failures. It's a dance I've seen 1,000 times in this industry. The creators build the castle, and the suits move in and change the locks. But there was something different today. Usually, Jordan ignores me. Today, he was watching me, like a predator watching a gazelle with a limp. As the meeting wrapped up and the investors started shaking hands, murmuring about disruptive tech and Q3 projections, I started packing up my notes. My laptop felt heavy, like it was loaded with secrets. Jordan sidled up to me. He leaned in close, invading my personal space with that overpowering cologne. Great work today, C, he said. He calls me C. I hate it. My name is Sienna. It's on my badge. It's on the patent filings. Thanks, Jordan, I replied, snapping my notebook shut. Just doing the job. Yeah, about that, he said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. We're going to need to finalize the documentation packet by EOD tomorrow. Just make sure your signature is on the handover, sweetheart. We want everything clean for the auditors. Sweetheart. The word hung in the air like a bad fart. He hadn't called me that in 2 years. Not since I corrected his math in front of the board. Why now? Why the sudden informality? And why was he so obsessed with the handover? The documentation was already in the shared drive. He had access. I'll update the files, I said, testing him. No, he smiled, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Physical copies. Signed. We're updating the IP registry. Just tie up the loose ends, okay? He patted my shoulder. A condescending, proprietary pat, like you'd pat a dog before you take it to the vet to be put down. I watched him walk away, high-fiving the CFO. My stomach churned. It wasn't the sweetheart. It was the handover. You don't ask the lead inventor to sign a handover for a project they are currently leading unless they aren't going to be leading it much longer. I looked down at the prototype. The LED indicator pulsed a steady, calm green. Everything was working perfectly. You have no idea, do you? I whispered to the battery. I walked back to my lab, my heels clicking on the linoleum. The R&D wing was quiet. My team had already left for the day to celebrate the successful demo. I was alone with the hum of the servers and the sinking feeling that the axe wasn't just falling, it had already severed the neck, and my head just hadn't realized it needed to roll yet. I sat at my desk and opened my email. Nothing. No good job from HR, no bonus notification. Just a calendar invite from Jordan for 9 a.m. tomorrow, status sync. Status sync is corporate code for we're firing you, but we want to make it sound like a conversation. I stared at the screen. I'm a woman of science. I deal in facts, data, and predictable outcomes. But right now, my intuition was screaming louder than a Geiger counter in Chernobyl. Jordan wanted the IP. He wanted the signature. And once he had it, I was going to be erased. But here's the thing about Jordan and men like him. They think they're the only ones playing the game. They think because I wear cardigans and bring my lunch in Tupperware that I'm soft. They mistake silence for submission. I didn't sign the handover papers that night. Instead, I backed up my personal hard drive. I cleared my browser history, and I waited, if they wanted a war. We're about to find out that they were fighting a nuclear physicist with a grudge. The next morning, the sky was the color of a bruised plum. Massachusetts weather always knows how to set a mood. I pulled into the parking lot at 8:45 a.m., 15 minutes early for my execution, I mean my status sync. I walked up to the side entrance, the one near the labs that I've used every day for 7 years. I held up my badge, beep. A harsh, angry red light. I tried it again, beep. Red light. You've got to be kidding me, I muttered, shivering slightly in the morning chill. I wiped the card on my sleeve. Maybe it was just a glitch. Maybe the magnetic strip was demagnetized, or maybe Jordan Carr is a predictable hack who follows the HR playbook for cowards to the letter. I walked around to the front lobby. The glass doors slid open, and the warmth of the heater hit me, smelling of floor wax. The receptionist, sweet girl named Emily who had helped fix a flat tire for last winter, looked up. Her face went pale. She looked down at her phone, avoiding my eyes. "I'm sorry, Sienna," she whispered, her voice trembling. "They told me to call security if you arrived." "It's okay, Emily," I said softly. It wasn't her fault. She was just another cog in the machine, grinding away. 2 minutes later, a security guard named Dave, who I usually shared coffee with, waddled out from the back. He looked miserable. "I have to escort you to conference room B, Sienna," Dave grumbled, looking at his shoes. "I'm sorry. Orders." "Let's go," Dave wouldn't want to keep the firing squad waiting. We walked through the bullpen. It was dead silent. People I've worked with for a decade, people whose kids' birthdays I know, were suddenly intensely interested in their spreadsheets. The silence was loud. It was the sound of fear. They knew if they looked at me, they might catch the contagion of unemployment. Conference room B, the windowless one, of course. Jordan was there. So was Linda from HR, a woman whose smile never reached her eyes, like a shark trying to mimic a human expression. "Have a seat, Sienna," Jordan said. He didn't stand up. He was scrolling on his phone. "Let's cut the crap, Jordan," I said, remaining standing. "Why is my badge deactivated?" Linda cleared her throat. "Sienna, company is undergoing a strategic pivot. We're restructuring the R&D division to align with new synergistic goals. Unfortunately, your position has been eliminated effective immediately." "Restructuring," I repeated, the word tasting like ash. "You mean the project I just finished? The one that passed final testing yesterday? That restructuring?" "The project is moving into a maintenance phase," Jordan said, finally looking up. His eyes were dead, glossy with triumph. "Don't need a lead architect for maintenance. We need technicians, I see," I said. My heart was hammering against my ribs, but I forced my breathing to remain steady. "Inhale, exhale. So 7 years of service, 3 patents, and millions in revenue, and I'm out?" "It's at will employment, Sienna," Linda chirped, pushing a folder across the table. "We're offering a generous severance package, 2 weeks for every year of service. Standard NDA, standard non-compete." Looked at the folder, the hush money packet, and my personal files, I asked. "My notebooks, the prototypes on my desk, company property," Jordan interjected quickly. Too quickly. "Everything created on company time, using company resources, belongs to us. It's in your contract, you know the drill." "What about the handover paperwork you asked for yesterday?" I asked, locking eyes with him. "We'll handle it internally," Jordan smirked. "Since you're no longer an employee. Your signature isn't required anymore. We have the files. We have the tech. We'll take it from here." There it was. The confession. He didn't need me to sign it over if he simply fired me and claimed blanket ownership. He thought he was being clever. He thought he had found a loophole. He was going to take my name off the patent application, slap his own on it as project lead, and ride my genius all the way to a C-suite promotion. "I want a copy of my original employment agreement included in my exit file," I said. My voice sounded strange to my own ears, distant, robotic. Jordan laughed. A short, barking sound. "Why, it's standard boilerplate. You signed it 10 years ago. I want it for my records," I insisted. "Fine," Linda sighed, typing something into her laptop. "I'll email it to your personal address along with the termination letter." "Do it now," I said. "Excuse me?" Jordan bristled. "Do it now, before I leave the building. I want to see the notification on my phone." Jordan rolled his eyes. "Jesus, Sienna, you're being dramatic. Just send it, Linda, so we can get her out of here." Linda tapped a few keys. Ping. My phone buzzed in my pocket. "Received," I said. I picked up the severance folder. I didn't open it. "I assume Dave is waiting to walk me out." "He is," Jordan said, leaning back in his chair, hands behind his head. "Good luck, Sienna. Maybe you can find a teaching gig. I hear high schools are desperate for science teachers." The insult was meant to sting. It was meant to belittle me, to reduce me from inventor to failed academic. But all I felt was a cold, crystallizing clarity. He thought he had won. He thought he had stripped me of everything: my job, my project, my dignity. I turned to the door. I didn't slam it. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I walked out with the precision of a clock mechanism. As Dave escorted me to the parking lot, past the dumpster where my career was supposedly rotting, I gripped my phone tight. Jordan Carr had made a critical error in his calculations. He assumed that because I was quiet, I was passive. He assumed that because I was a woman in her 40s, I was grateful just to be in the room. He forgot that I'm an engineer. And the first rule of engineering is always check the specs, especially the specs you wrote yourself. To understand how Jordan Carr just signed his own death warrant, we have to travel back in time. 10 years to be exact. I wasn't the hardened, cynical veteran I am now. I was younger, hungrier, and working for a chaotic startup called Voltaic Solutions that was being acquired by the massive conglomerate I just got fired from. Acquisitions are messy. It's like a marriage where both families hate each other and are fighting over the wedding registry. There were lawyers everywhere, suits flying back and forth, equity being diluted and promises being broken. They wanted me bad. I was the talent. The acquisition was contingent on retaining the core engineering team. I sat in a conference room much like the one I was just kicked out of. But back then, the table was covered in pizza boxes and half-empty Red Bulls. Hiring manager was a guy named Rick. Rick was nice, but he was overwhelmed. The legal team from the parent company was throwing contracts at us like confetti. Standard employment agreement, IP assignment protocol, non-disclosure agreement. Most of my colleagues just signed. They saw the salary bump, the stock options, and the shiny new badge, and they scribbled their names without reading the fine print. But I read everything. It's a habit. Maybe a compulsion. My father was a watchmaker. He taught me that the smallest gear, if ignored, is the one that stops the clock. I was reading the intellectual property assignment section. It was draconian. Paragraph 4, Section B. The company retains exclusive, perpetual, worldwide rights to all inventions, discoveries, and improvements made by the employee during the term of employment. Standard stuff. But then I saw the termination clause. It was vague. It implied that if I left, they kept everything. Forever. I didn't like that. I had ideas in my head that didn't belong to them yet. And I had a gut feeling that corporate loyalty was a myth, so I did something risky. I took the Word document of the contract, they had emailed it to me for review, and I made an edit. I didn't track changes. I didn't highlight it in neon yellow. I just added a subsection to paragraph 4. Paragraph 4. Subsection D. In the event that the employee is terminated without cause, as defined in Section 7, any and all intellectual property created by the employee that has not been explicitly and formally assigned via a separate, notarized deed of assignment at the time of termination shall immediately revert to the employee. It was a reversion clause, a poison pill. I sent the document back to Rick and the legal team. Here's the thing about corporate lawyers during a merger. They are tired. They are reading thousands of pages a day. They are looking for the big numbers, salary, equity, severance caps. They aren't looking for a single paragraph inserted by a mid-level engineer in the IP section. I went into the signing meeting. The lawyer, an exhausted-looking woman with coffee stains on her blouse, slid the contract across the table. "Did you make any changes to the comp structure?" she asked, rubbing her temples. "No," I said honestly. "The salary is fine, great, sign here, here, and here." She didn't read it. Rick didn't read it. They just wanted the deal closed so they could go home. I signed it. They countersigned it. For 10 years, that document has been sitting in a digital archive, gathering dust. Jordan Carr has never read it. Jordan Carr sees standard employment agreement and assumes it's the same boilerplate he gives to the interns. He assumes that because the company paid for the lab, the electricity, and the coffee, they own my brain. But Jordan forgot the most important rule of contracts. Specific terms override general terms. And he forgot the second most important rule. Never fire the person who knows where the bodies are buried, especially if she's the one who dug the graves. Back in the present, driving my Subaru away from the office, I thought about that clause. I thought about the cause for termination. Restructuring is not cause. Cause is stealing money, or punching a coworker, or burning down the building. They fired me without cause, and Jordan, in his arrogance, had specifically refused to let me sign the handover paperwork. He said, explicitly, since you're no longer an employee, your signature isn't required anymore. He played himself by firing me before I signed the specific assignment deed for the modular battery patent, and by doing it without cause, he had just triggered paragraph 4, subsection D. The patent for the battery, the one potentially worth hundreds of millions of dollars, didn't belong to the company anymore. It belonged to me. I gripped the steering wheel, a small, terrifying smile spreading across my face. I wasn't just unemployed. I was the sole owner of the company's flagship product. They didn't have a clue. My house is quiet. It's a mid-century modern in the woods, paid for by the patents I sold them years ago. It's clean, organized, and devoid of live, laugh, love signs. Instead, I have framed schematics of the Apollo guidance computer. I kicked off my heels and walked straight to my home office. It's my command center. 3 monitors, a Herman Miller chair, and a laser printer that actually works because I fix it myself. I opened my personal email. There it was. The message from Linda, termination docs Sienna MPDF. I downloaded it. My hands weren't shaking. They were steady like a surgeon's before the first incision. I scrolled. Page 1, page 5, page 12. There it was. Paragraph 4, subsection D. It was still there. They hadn't doctored it. They hadn't noticed it. It was sitting there in black and white, a landmine waiting for a foot. I hit print. Printer word to life, the rhythm soothing. CH chunk, the sound of justice. I took the warm pages from the tray. I grabbed a yellow highlighter. I didn't slash at the paper. I carefully, neatly highlighted the clause. A straight, glowing yellow line. Then I went to the USPTO, United States Patent and Trademark Office website. I logged in with my inventor credentials. I pulled up the application for modular thermal regulated power cell architecture. Status pending. Applicant company name. Inventor Sienna Miller. Here's the kicker. The assignment of rights document, the legal form that officially transfers ownership from the inventor to the company, was listed as to be filed. That was the document Jordan told me I didn't need to sign. I printed that page too. I placed the two documents side by side on my oak desk. On the left, the contract saying the IP reverts to me if I'm fired without cause. On the right, the proof that the IP was never formally assigned before said firing. It was a beautiful logic loop, a perfect circle of incompetence. I could have called them right then. I could have emailed Linda and said, "Hey, you guys made a mistake." They would have panicked, maybe offered me my job back or tried to bribe me. But I didn't want my job back. I didn't want a bribe, I wanted blood. I wanted Jordan Carr to stand in front of the board and explain why the product he promised them, the product they were banking their fiscal year on, was currently owned by the woman he just fired for synergy. I went to the kitchen and made a cup of Earl Grey. I stood by the window, watching the wind strip the leaves off the oak trees in my yard. Winter was coming, and for Jordan, it was going to be a long, cold freeze. My phone buzzed. A text from a colleague, Greg, one of the junior engineers. "Greg, holy shit, see, they just escorted you out? The place is in meltdown. Jordan is walking around like he owns the place, telling everyone to focus on the future. He's already moved his stuff into your office." I stared at the screen. He moved into my office. He was probably putting his feet on my desk right now. He was probably erasing my whiteboard, wiping away the equations that solved the thermal coupling issue. I typed back, "Greg, keep your head down. Don't sign anything. Watch the show." I deleted the text immediately after sending, no paper trail. I went back to my office and opened a new physical folder, a crisp manila folder. I labeled it in Sharpie, exit strategy. I slid the highlighted contract and the patent status into the folder. I wasn't going to strike yet. I needed them to commit. I needed them to go public with the lie. I needed Jordan to stand on a stage and claim he owned it. Because when you trap a rat, you don't snap the trap when it sniffs the cheese. You wait until it takes a bite. 2 days later, Wednesday, 2 p.m. EST. I was sitting in my living room, wearing yoga pants and a cashmere sweater, a glass of Chardonnay in my hand. On my laptop screen was the Q4 Strategic Outlook webinar. This was a public call for institutional investors, the big money, people who control the stock price. Jordan was on screen. He looked polished. He had clearly had a haircut. The lighting in the conference room was flattering, hiding the dark circles of a man who was probably realizing that running an R&D department is harder than it looks. "Welcome, everyone," Jordan said, flashing that shark smile. "I'm thrilled to share some updates on our flagship initiative, Project ETHA." I hit record on my screen capture software. As you know, Jordan continued, clicking a slide remote, "We have successfully completed the validation phase. The modular battery system is not just a concept. It is a fully realized product, wholly owned and developed by our internal team. Wholly owned." I took a sip of wine. "Say it again, Jordan," I whispered. "For the FTC, we have secured all necessary intellectual property rights," Jordan lied. He didn't even blink. He probably believed it. He probably thought Linda in HR had magically fixed everything with a filing cabinet. And we are poised to begin licensing discussions with major automotive partners next month. The chat box on the side of the webinar was filling up with questions from analysts. Goldman Sachs analyst, "Can you confirm the patent status? Is the IP fully secured?" Jordan read the question. He nodded confidently. "Great question. Yes, the IP is fully secured. We have a robust patent portfolio surrounding this technology, and it is 100% company property." Gotcha. He just made a material misrepresentation to investors. That's not just a firing offense. That's go to jail territory. That's SEC investigation territory. He was selling a house he didn't own. I watched him wax poetic about my thermal cooling system. He used words like proprietary algorithm and vertical integration. He was butchering the science, confusing voltage with amperage at one point, but the suits didn't care. They saw dollar signs. "We expect this product line to add $40 million to our EBITDA by next year," Jordan concluded. The stock ticker at the bottom of the screen showed a little jump. The market liked the lie. I stopped the recording. I saved the file as Jordan lies to investors MP4. I felt a strange mix of emotions. Part of me was sickened. This was my work, my baby, being paraded around by a stepfather who beat it. But the other part of me, the cold, calculating part, was thrilled. He had crossed the Rubicon. There was no going back now. If I had revealed the clause before this call, they could have spun it. They could have delayed the call. They could have negotiated. But now they were on the hook for securities fraud if they didn't deliver the IP. and they couldn't deliver the IP because they fired the owner. I closed the laptop. I walked to the kitchen and rinsed my wine glass. It was time to send the mail, not an email. An email can be deleted. An email can be ignored. I needed something physical, something that had to be signed for, something that would sit on a desk like a ticking bomb. I went to my exit strategy folder. I added one more document, a cover letter, to Legal Department and CEO from Sienna Millery. Notice of patent reversion, immediate action required. I kept it brief. I didn't use emotional language. I didn't use sarcasm. I used the language of the contract. Pursuant to paragraph 4, subsection D of my employment agreement dated date, and following my termination without cause on date, please be advised that all intellectual property rights regarding the modular thermal regulated power cell architecture have reverted to the undersigned. You are hereby ordered to cease and desist all commercialization, licensing, and representation of ownership regarding this technology. I signed it with my favorite pen. The ink flowed dark and permanent. I put it all in a stiff cardboard envelope. Tomorrow, I would go to the post office. I would pay for certified mail, return receipt requested, and then I would wait for the explosion. The post office in my town is a small brick building that smells like old glue and damp wool. It's run by a woman named Barb who knows everyone's business. Morning, Sienna, Barb said, peering over her glasses. You're not at work today? Taking a little break, Barb, I said, sliding the envelope across the counter. Need this sent certified. Priority. Return receipt. Barb weighed it. She slapped the green sticker on it. Important stuff? She asked. You could say that, I smiled. Just some legal housekeeping. That'll be $8.45. I paid. I watched her toss it into the outgoing bin. That envelope contained the pin to a grenade, and I had just pulled it 2 days later, Friday. I knew exactly when the letter arrived because I got the digital notification on my phone delivered to front desk. Signed for reception. Emily signed for it. She would put it in the interoffice mail. It would travel up the elevator. It would land on the general counsel's desk around 11 o'clock a.m. I sat at my kitchen table staring at my phone. 11:15 a.m., nothing. 11:30 a.m., nothing. 11:45 a.m., my phone rang. It wasn't the company, it was Greg again. Greg, hey, are you okay? Something weird is happening. Me, what kind of weird? Greg, legal just stormed into the R&D wing. They're seizing hard drives. They just kicked Jordan out of his office, well, your old office. He looks like he's gonna throw up. A slow, warm satisfaction spread through my chest. Me, interesting, keep me posted. 10 minutes later, my phone rang again. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. It rang again immediately. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. Third time. Now it was the personal cell number of the general counsel, a man named Sterling who I had met maybe twice in 10 years. I picked up. This is Sienna. Sienna, this is Sterling from legal. His voice was tight, breathless. He sounded like he was running. We received your letter. I assumed you would, I said, picking at a loose thread on my sweater. Sienna, there must be a misunderstanding. The clause you referenced, it's highly irregular. Is it? I asked innocently. It's in the contract. You have a copy. I sent you a copy. Yes, well, he stammered. We need to discuss this. We need to meet. Immediately. I'm not an employee, Sterling, I said. I don't have to meet with you immediately. I'm actually quite busy. Sienna, please, this is serious. We have investors. We have the board. I know, I said, my voice dropping to 0 degrees Kelvin. I watched the webinar. Wholly owned, right? That's what Jordan said. Silence on the other end, dead. Heavy silence. He knew that I knew. What do you want? Sterling asked. The arrogance was gone. It was just fear now. I want Jordan to know, I said. I want you to explain it to him. Slowly, use small words. Sienna, I'll be in touch regarding licensing terms next week, I said. Until then, if you touch my patent, I'll sue you for infringement in federal court. Have a nice weekend, Sterling. I hung up. I blocked his number. I imagined the scene in the boardroom. Yelling, the finger pointing. The frantic calls to outside counsel asking if the clause was enforceable. Spoiler, it is. I had a lawyer friend check it in 2015. They were scrambling. They were realizing that they had built a skyscraper on land they didn't own, and the landlord just showed up with a bulldozer. But I wasn't done. The private panic wasn't enough. Jordan needed public consequences. I opened my laptop again. I opened Proton Mail, secure. Encrypted email. I had drafted a message to a reporter at TechCrunch, a reporter who loves exposing corporate fraud. Subject, exclusive, company name falsifies IP ownership in major tech rollout. Attached, the recording of the webinar, the contract, the termination letter, the patent status. I hovered the mouse over the send button. For the handover, I whispered, click. You know what the modern version of the Roman Colosseum is. It's a Slack channel during a corporate crisis. I obviously didn't have access to the company Slack anymore, but Greg did. And Greg, bless his chaotic heart, was FaceTiming me from his car in the parking lot because he couldn't handle the vibes inside. It's a bloodbath, see, Greg said, holding his phone with shaking hands. Marcus, the CEO, flew in from New York on the chopper. I saw him land. He looked like he wanted to murder someone. Is Jordan still in the building? Asked, putting my phone on speaker while I watered my plants. Jordan is in the boardroom. They've been in there for 2 hours. Sterling is there. The CFO is there. I heard yelling through the soundproof glass, like actual screaming. What are people doing? Nothing, absolutely nothing. Everyone is just sitting at their desks pretending to work, but we're all just waiting for the explosion. Oh, and the stock. Have you checked the stock? I hadn't. I pulled up the ticker on my iPad. Down 12% in the last hour. The TechCrunch article had dropped. Breaking, tech giant accused of IP theft and securities fraud regarding flagship battery project. The headline was in bold, angry letters. The reporter had done their homework. They quoted my clause. They quoted Jordan's lie from the webinar. They pointed out the discrepancy in the USPTO filing. It was viral. It was trending on Twitter, #BatteryGate. They just ordered pizza, Greg said. Squinting at the building, that means they're staying all night. Jordan won't be staying, I predicted. Wait, Greg said. Wait, someone's coming out. He turned the camera toward the front doors of the office building. The automatic doors slid open. Two security guards walked out. Between them was Jordan Carr. He wasn't wearing his suit jacket. His tie was undone. He was carrying a cardboard box. The classic, humiliating box of shame. Oh my God, Greg whispered. Actually did it, they walked him. I watched on the tiny screen as Jordan walked to his Tesla. He looked small, he looked deflated, he dropped his keys. He had to bend down to pick them up, and for a second he just stayed there, crouched on the asphalt. I didn't feel joy, I didn't feel pity, I felt balanced. The scales of the universe had tipped wildly, and I had just slammed a heavy weight down to correct them. He's gone, see, Greg said. You killed the king. He wasn't a king, Greg, I said softly. He was just a jester in a nice suit. My iPad pinged an email from Marcus, CEO. Subject, can we talk? Just 3 words, no legal jargon, no threats. The CEO was bypassing legal. He was bypassing HR. He was reaching out directly. That meant he was terrified. He knew that the only way to save the stock, to save the product, to save his job was to get that patent back. He knew the only person who could give it to him was the woman they had thrown out like trash 3 days ago. I didn't reply. Let him sweat. Let the stock drop another 5%. Let the investors blow up his phone. I poured the rest of the Chardonnay down the sink. I needed a clear head. The end game was approaching. They were going to try to buy me. They were going to offer me money, reinstated employment, stock options, the works, but they didn't understand. I didn't want to work for them, and I didn't just want money. I wanted admission. I went to my closet and pulled out my board meeting suit. It's navy blue, sharp as a razor, and costs more than Jordan's car. I hung it on the door. I would reply tomorrow, and I would set the terms. The next morning, the internet had done what the internet does best. It had turned a complex legal dispute into a meme war. My burner Twitter account, which I use solely to follow space news, was blowing up. The TechCrunch article had been retweeted 15,000 times. Someone had found a picture of Jordan from his LinkedIn, smug, arms crossed, and captioned it, "When you fire the inventor but forgot to read the terms and conditions." Another one showed Danny DeVito, oddly fitting with the caption. So anyway, I started infringing. The comments were brutal. Imagine investing in a tech company that doesn't own its tech. Clown face, the Sienna woman is my hero. Queen behavior, shorting this stock to oblivion. The stock was now down 22%. The board of directors had issued a vague statement about internal review and misunderstandings, which only made it worse. I was in the middle of reading a Reddit thread, analyzing my contract clause. The legal subreddits were having a field day when my phone rang again. It was Marcus's executive assistant. Miss Miller? She sounded exhausted. Yes. Marcus would like to know if you can come in today anytime. He'll clear his schedule. I can be there at 2:00 p.m., I said, and I'm bringing my own counsel, of course. Whatever you need. I hung up. I didn't have counsel. I didn't need one. I knew the contract better than anyone, but it sounded intimidating. I spent the next few hours prepping. I wasn't prepping a defense. I was prepping a sales pitch. See, I knew they couldn't redesign the battery. It would take 2 years to work around my patent. They didn't have 2 years. They had maybe 2 weeks before the automakers walked away from the licensing deals. They had to have my patent. I printed one last document. A licensing agreement. Standard industry rates are usually 3 to 5% royalties. I wrote in 15%, and a $5 million upfront signing bonus. A public retraction of my termination. I drove to the office. The parking lot was full of news vans. I parked in the visitor lot. I walked past the cameras. A reporter shouted, "Are you Sienna Miller? Do you own the battery?" I didn't answer. I just put on my sunglasses and walked through the sliding doors. Emily at the front desk looked at me like I was a celebrity. She buzzed me in without asking for ID. "Go get Sienna," she whispered. I took the elevator to the 14th floor. The same elevator I had taken down with my box of shame just days ago. The air on the executive floor was thin. It smelled of fear and stale coffee. Marcus was standing in the doorway of the boardroom. He looked 10 years older than he had on the webinar. "Sienna," he said, extending a hand. "Thank you for coming." I didn't shake it. "Shall we?" I gestured to the room. We walked in. Sterling Legal was there. The CFO was there. Jordan's empty chair was glaringly obvious. I sat at the head of the table. "Let's keep this simple," I said, placing my folder on the table. The sound echoed in the silent room. "You have a product you can't sell. I have a patent I don't need. We have a supply and demand issue." Marcus sighed, rubbing his face. "Sienna, look, Jordan made a mistake, a grave mistake. He's been terminated for cause. We want to make this right." We want you back leading the team. No, I said. We'll double your salary. No, triple. Marcus, I said, leaning forward, you're not listening. I don't work here anymore. I am an independent entity. You are a client. I slid the licensing agreement across the table. These are my terms to license my technology to your company. Sterling picked up the paper, his eyes widened as he read the numbers. 15%, he choked out. That's extortionate. Standard is 5%. Standard is for employees who didn't get fired for succeeding, I said. 15% is the asshole tax. Marcus looked at Sterling. Do we have a choice? Sterling looked at the paper, then at me, then at the patent filing I had laid out. Technically, Sterling hesitated. No, if she walks, the product is dead. We'd have to restate earnings. The class action lawsuits alone would bankrupt us. Marcus closed his eyes. He took a deep breath. Fine, he whispered. I need that in writing, I said. And I need the upfront payment wired by EOD. Fine, and one more thing, I said. What? Marcus snapped, losing his cool for a second. I want Jordan's office chair, the Herman Miller one. He took mine when he moved in. Marcus looked at me, bewildered. Then a hysterical little laugh escaped his lips. Take the damn chair, Sienna. I walked out of that building with a signed licensing deal worth more than my cumulative salary for the last 20 years. I also walked out with a rolling office chair, pushing it across the parking lot asphalt like a demented shopper. The news crews were still there. They took pictures of me loading the chair into the back of my Subaru. It was absurd. It was perfect. The wire transfer hit my account at 4:55 p.m. $5 million. Notification looked just like a seamless order confirmation, just with more zeros. I drove home. The adrenaline was fading, replaced by a deep, bone-weary exhaustion. I had won. I had crushed Jordan. I had humbled the CEO. I had secured my financial future. But as I sat in my quiet house looking at the contract, I realized something. They would still make money. They would pass the cost of my royalties on to the consumer. The battery would go into cars, and people would drive them, and the world would keep spinning. Jordan would probably get a job at a startup in 6 months, spinning his firing as a philosophical difference regarding IP strategy. The game doesn't change. The players just swap seats, but I wasn't playing anymore. I went to my home lab. The prototype, my original prototype, was sitting on the bench. I patted it. We did it, girl. I opened a bottle of the really expensive stuff. 1998 Cabernet I'd been saving for my wedding, which never happened, or a Nobel Prize, unlikely. This felt close enough. My phone buzzed, a text from Marcus. Marcus, we're issuing the press release, amicable resolution, strategic partnership. I didn't reply. I took a sip of the wine. It tasted like oak and victory. I'm not going to start a new company. I'm not going to save the world. I think I'm going to buy a small house on the coast, install a really killer HVAC system, and spend my days inventing things that have absolutely no commercial value. Robotic bird feeders, self-heating slippers, things that bring joy, not quarterly earnings. And if anyone ever asks me for handover again, I'm going to hand them a grenade. I raised my glass to the empty room. To paragraph 4, subsection D, I said. Then I blocked Marcus's number, turned off my phone, and listened to the silence. It was the most expensive silence in the world, and I owned every second of it.